I'm wondering if Miss Abira could hear me.
Yes, yes, you're audible.
Okay, thank you so much for being here, and thank you very much for just giving me this opportunity. I'm just acting like a moderator here to connect the both societies. First of all, just I will take a little bit time to introduce a little bit to our viewers about the societies for both India and Pakistan here. SPS, Sindh Philosophical Society. It's founded by the philosophy students of the University of Sindh, and they have the stance that this subject, despite having a wide scope and still uh, deinstitutionalized here, and including from curriculum of schools, colleges, and universities, so they aim to promote its wider scope by holding seminars, study circles, and workshops to redefine its actual and practical importance in 21st century. That is, philosophy is just not for the sake of philosophy, but it's for the sake of change and practical importance. And I think it's the same stance the Philosophical Society of Scottish Church College, Kolkata, India have, and their objective is to help students arrive at a clear concept of what the real life actually as a whole, and their motto is to, I just like this motto, is to learn by doing, and I hope you people are just doing quite well in your domains. We're having our guest speaker from India, and definitely I have to introduce. And very frankly, I have to jot down all these things, and I will read them as it is because you are. I mean, Miss Abira Das is has been into so many things, and she's doing just great. So I'm just going to read it as it is. Pardon, I had to copy that for that. Amira is the Assistant Secretary of Philosophical Society of Scottish Church, currently working as a trainee journalist at Alt News and occasionally writes for Feminism in India. It's a big platform, I think, to write for and talk about. She has previously been working at The Telegraph in schools and interviewed over 60 renowned personalities. To name a few, Nobel laureate Dr. Venkataraman Radhakrishna, if I pronounced it right, and Pulitzer winner Andrew Sean Greer, an Indian bureaucrat, civil servant, diplomat, politician, and author of renowned book An Era of Darkness, Dr. Shashi Tharoor. Abir is particularly interested in political philosophy and queer studies. So thank you very much for being here, and I think now I have spoken a lot. Without further ado, I will definitely start my questions. I'm having a series of questions with me to ask you. We know the topic, it's quite a very serious, and it's definitely the need of the hour. What is feminism and its role in 21st century? So my very first and typical question you will start from is, what is feminism or feminist philosophy, and how it works as emancipatory territory for the rights of women? How you think so?
First of all, thank you, Sumaira, for that wonderful introduction, and thank you to Sindh Philosophical Society for inviting me over and having initiating conversation on such extremely relevant topics which are gaining extreme importance, especially in the times that we live in today. Just a small request, Sumaira, if you can maybe straighten your camera or something. I guess because on my phone it appears that you're tilted. Maybe because you're doing it
Okay.
from the
Okay, thank
laptop
you.
or something. Yeah. Ah. Yes,
Would that be
yes.
okay?
Now it's better. Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. So, just to speak on what is feminist philosophy. So, I'll just give a little bit of background that a lot of people have a generalized conception of feminism because the word feminism has gained a lot of popularity, especially in these times of social media, where everybody is throwing feminism word left and right. But what does it mean? A very basic and simple definition of feminism that you can even Google out is that it is basically a principle that believes in equality of all sexes and gender identities, economic equality, political equality, judicial, social, you name it, class, religious equality, all sorts of equality. But when I say feminist philosophy, when we use it in the term of academic sense, or say in the socio-political sense, feminist philosophy is a kind of philosophy that involves both a political movement and also intellectual justice. So So, in feminism, feminism actually initially started in the West in the mid 19th century. So, from 1850s to 1920s, you have the first wave of feminism where women fought for the political rights, the suffragette movement, and the right for the woman to vote. And then from 1920s to 1960s or 70s, you have the second wave of feminism, where Simone de Beauvoir comes in and other feminist author comes in, and philosophers come in, and they revolutionize that. Okay, we got the political rights, or to certain extent, but now we also need body autonomy. We need equal pay in the workspace. We also want women to be earning members without experiencing the various social obstacles, such as doing the housework or doing those chores. So the first wave of feminism till 1920s were mostly a political, was mostly a movement to gain political rights for the woman. The second wave of feminism was mostly centric to gaining the social rights of the women along with the economic rights. And now, which is the third wave of feminism, which started after the 1965 to 1970s. In the third wave of feminism, we have women talking about the intersections that are there. So when I say that, okay, we want equal rights for women, before that, a certain questions come in, like that means that women are oppressed in the society. Women are oppressed in all patriarchal societies. So concepts such as like that come in. But when we say that we want liberation for women, the feminist theory which precisely goes with liberation or emancipation of women, it goes with that we want women to be liberated. But then the question comes, what woman? Women from which backgrounds do we want? Is it the woman from, because we have women from different castes, different class, different religious backgrounds, uh, so you name it, different racial backgrounds. So where do we put the hierarchy of oppression? Because an extremely rich upper caste woman doesn't get oppressed equally or equal in the sense compared to a woman from a lower class background or a backward class background. The things become more difficult when, say, a Caucasian woman will have more privileges than a woman of color. An American woman will have more privileges than an Indian woman in the global spectrum. So, a Dalit woman will have less privileges than a Brahmin woman. So, all these intersections that came in, which is now termed as intersectional feminism, that you understand the different hierarchy that plays in oppression of women. So that was actually a term that was coined by Kimberly Crenshaw on the intersectional feminism, and it's right now one of the most popular methods of feminism. And how feminism helps in liberating women, that part of the question, in since it is a political movement, since feminism is also a political movement, it challenges, or rather tries to understand, that how these structures that uphold the patriarchy, that uphold the patriarchal structure, how do these structures work? How does the judiciary work in such a way that women are being, have to bear the brunt of discrimination. How the political structure works in such a way that it does not encourage female representation. How does the academic structure work? So it's all about understanding these social structures, socio-economic, political structures, and so that to break that structure of power, because all the structures that I mentioned so far, these are all structures of power. And to break those structures of power and break the internal structure of power, which as women or as men, we have all internalized patriarchy. So to break that is also how the feminist philosophers or the feminist activists are actively working, so that there is matlab, not only in judiciary sense there is equality, or not only in the political sense there is equality, but in the social sense also there is equality. So
Right. इससे अंदाजा तो होता है ऑफकोर्स सोशल जो है हमारा स्ट्रक्चर वो बहुत ज्यादा स्ट्रांग है इस सेंसेस के अंदर और एक सीन में मेरी बात आ रही थी जस्ट करेक्ट मी इफ आई एम रॉन्ग is culture is the very much factor as well in this, क्योंकि हमारा वेस्टर्न और ईस्टर्न कल्चर जो है वो बहुत डिफरेंट है और वहाँ स्टिल इफ दे वुमेन आर फाइटिंग फॉर द राइट्स, बट यहाँ की प्लाइट और है और वहाँ की जरा डिफरेंट है. सो अगर इसको देखते हैं तो आप बताइए कि हाउ जेंडर डिस्क्रिमिनेशन अफेक्ट्स द लाइफ एज अ होल इन द सोसाइटी.
Yeah, so like you said, Western countries may they have different sets of or different kinds of oppression, and Eastern countries like India, like Pakistan and China, we have different kinds of oppression of women. And for example, a very upper class woman in America would face uh, say inequality in payment, inequality in payment for equal work. But that problem is not the massive problem of the backward Indian woman, woman from the lower class. So that is not the problem, because here the women are being, they have different sets of problems. They cannot even go out in the open field without being sexually harassed. So
Exactly.
forget about equal payment, they cannot even get out of their house. So the difference is there, but regardless of the difference, like I said in the hierarchical structure, that regardless of the difference, what happens is that the structure plays. The structure, the patriarchal structure is so solid and so it is so solid and so powerful that it pervades all layers of society. So whether it is Western or Indian society, we will have different views on feminism. We will have different problems to combat with, but the problem at the crux always remains the the oppression of the woman. A very classic example is that a few months back, we saw the Iran uprising, the women's revolution in Iran, and we saw that how women were fighting for their liberty to choose whether they want to wear the hijab or not. At the same time, very interestingly, in India, in Karnataka, the students, Muslim students, were fighting for the right to wear the hijab. So these two things were happening parallelly, completely different priorities, but at the crux of it, the priority remains that women have the liberty, women should have the liberty, the freedom to choose whatever they want to wear. If I want to wear a hijab, I should have the right to wear a hijab, and if I do not want to wear the hijab, then I should not have to. No structure, no government, no institution should be forcing me to do something and not the other. It is ultimately boils down to women's right to freedom and women's right to choice. So, different countries, different governments, different political structures, but the crux of both the governments, both the structures, be it Iran and India, it remains that women do not have the liberty.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. It's quite
yeah.
true. इसमें अगर हम एक और चीज़ इन्वॉल्व करते हैं देन विच इज नॉट प्रेजेंट या एब्सेंट है वो है आपका लॉ. वी डू नॉट हैव एनी सच सेफगार्ड फ्रॉम द लॉ साइड. हमारे पास कुछ कानून ऐसे नहीं है जिनके पीछे हम जा सकते हैं, काम कर सकते हैं. इसके अलावा भी स्टिल फर्दर इफ वी सी देयर women are still having the immense pressure from the men's side while fighting for their rights. But still, there are men now that they are voicing against gender discrimination. So, how you see that how we can encourage more men to stand up for the rights of women?
Encouraging men to stand up. That's a I would suggest, and I keep telling this to my friends, to my family, is that the first, whether you whether you identify yourself as a feminist or not, or whatever it is, the first step to understand equality of the gender is to, I believe, is to observe, and this goes for women also, is to observe and examine and analyze. So there is a lot of, from a very individual view, there should be a lot of, self-reflection that needs to be there. So, and often what happens is when you are a man in a patriarchal society, privilege is blinding. When you have privilege, you don't know you will have privilege. You cannot feel your privilege. But those who do not have the privilege can feel that they are unprivileged. For example, I am an upper caste woman. I'm an upper caste woman. I do not experience caste discrimination. I do not. But that does not mean that just because I do not experience caste discrimination, it doesn't mean that caste doesn't exist. It doesn't mean that casteism doesn't exist. Because women from the scheduled caste, or the scheduled tribe, experience the oppression. They experience the oppression, and for them, the caste discrimination is very real. But for me, it isn't because my privilege is blinding me. So, for men, they need to sort of, just examine and observe. For everything that you see on Instagram, on social media, on news, why is a particular thing happening, and who benefits from that? Anything, who benefits from that? So, because the first way to understand that patriarchy affects men as well. It adversely affects men as well. ऐसा नहीं है that men are all enjoying and it's all good for them and it's all the women who are being sidelined for in history. Men also experience the brunt of patriarchy, and a few examples of that is that um, when you're a man, you're always under the pressure to earn more, to be the breadwinner of the family. And why does this happen? Why are you expected to be the only breadwinner? Why can't your wife, why can't your daughter or other female members in the family be also the breadwinner? But for them to be the breadwinner, for them to earn, they also need to have equal access to education, which doesn't happen. In a family where there is a boy and a girl, the first priority to educate goes to the man, to the boy. So when the boy becomes more educated, the boy is expected to earn more. And that becomes an unnecessary pressure on men. Number one. Number two, men don't cry. Men don't cry. उन लोगों को रोना नहीं आता, मर्द को दर्द नहीं होता. किसने बोला? किसने बोला? So that creates a lot of, because men's mental health are far worse than compared to the mental health of other genders. Keeping the LGBTQ community aside. So, because men are never taught to experience or express their emotions. If you express your emotions, expressing emotions is characterized as a very feminine trait. So when a man tries to express their emotions, they are characterized as a very in a derogatory sense as a very effeminate men. कि लड़कियों जैसे रो रहा है तू. So it affects men, and patriarchy affects men. And to understand that when you first understand that patriarchy is affecting women, but at the same time it is affecting you also in a different way. It is affecting you in a different way. Once a man understands that, and once they try to combat that internally as well as externally, that is where I think men play a huge role in in making the feminist movement progress in future. To understand that when I hear the feminism, it is not just about women; it is about all genders, including men.
या एग्जैक्टली इससे फिर जहन में यही आता है कि अगर हम बात करते हैं कि जेंडर डिस्क्रिमिनेशन है और वी बोथ मैन एंड वुमेन आर विक्टिम ऑफ सच डिस्क्रिमिनेशन, तो शायद यहाँ पर यही गलती है कि हम सबसे पहले इस स्पीशी को, अक्सर मैं बात करती हूँ कि हम इसको लेते हैं कि ही इज अ मैन एंड शी इज अ वुमेन. हम पहले ये नहीं देखते कि वी बोथ आर ह्यूमन. तो अगर हम इंसान की कैटेगरी में रहेंगे तो ऑब्वियसली हमें पता होगा, क्योंकि इंसान है तो इक्वली एटलीस्ट राइट्स हैं, फिर हमारी फर्दर डिविजन चल सकती हैं या नहीं चल सकती हैं. आपने बात की, स्टार्ट किया है, तो क्वेश्चन जो है मैं इसी को कोटिंग पहले करूंगी कि पेट्रियार्की के बारे में बात की, तो इसको फर्दर जरा उस तरह से डिफाइन कीजिए कि what is patriarchy and what are the psychological reasons, because such things always work with the psychology of a society.
So, I think so. Patriarchy is basically a social structure that favors or upholds the privileges of the men at the cost of women and the LGBTQ community. Now, that's the standard, almost standard definition of patriarchy. But again, in philosophy, there are obviously questions like when you talk about oppression of the woman, the concept comes: what is oppression? What constitutes as a gender oppression, and how is it different from other forms of oppression, which also affects women? The question comes on, like you said, about morality and ethics, which many philosophers will, you know, they will try to argue that it's a very subjective form of the world. What is moral to you might not be moral to me. So how do we come to the objective conclusions of what is ethics and morality? But coming to the point of how does it affect psychologically, I think it has its roots in the society and the culture, the patriarchal culture that is very prevalent in the society. So there is a lot of indoctrination that happens, and by that I mean is that when you're born in a particular society, nobody is born as a misogynist. I feel that nobody is born as a misogynist. They are taught to be misogynist. In the society, they are taught to be misogynist. Nobody is born as a racist. Nobody is born as a casteist. They are taught to be casteist in the society because as children, we pick up habits from the society. We learn certain, values, norms from our parents, from our friends, and that affects the way we view the world. So when a boy is taught that you are above your sister, the boy will learn that only because the boy's critical faculties haven't evolved to the point where they will question it. तो एक 7 साल का बच्चा वही सीखेगा जो उसको सिखाया जाएगा. So this is how it psychologically affects. Like I'm pretty sure there is a point where every boy can say that yes, at some point of my life, I have heard from my elders or my friends that men don't cry. I have watched movies or I have learned it from media that this is how a man should be, this is how a woman should be. So I have internalized that learning. And that is the learning that I have internalized is the learning that I am propagating also. मैंने मेरी मम्मी ने मुझे कहा कि मर्द को दर्द नहीं होता तो मैं भी दूसरों को कहूंगा कि मर्द को दर्द नहीं होता. So this is how it psychologically affects, and it also shapes your own sense of identity. So when we are born in a patriarchal society, when we learn these things, it shapes us. It shapes our view of us. What makes me a man? What makes me a woman? It shapes us in certain ways, and that is how we are psychologically propagating that the learning that we have picked up from the society by socializing.
That's quite well explained. ऐसा ही है और इसी को अगर फर्दर मैं कनेक्ट करती हूँ तो such misogynistic attitudes we have in our society, of course, on the basis of sex. So, what other factors you can see other than culture? I mean, the dogma or the religion, so-called social norms or conventions, traditions, these are responsible as well for this.
Of course, like I said, that every structure that is there, not just religion, you have the judicial structure, you have the family structure, the educational institutions, all of these institutions, all of these structures, they propagate a certain thinking that this is how men should be, this is how women should be, and that is that. So coming to the point of religion, like I was talking about the hijab and the burqa. So in the Hindu culture also, we have that woman should be wearing this, this ghumra that we call. The question comes like when a woman wants to wear a hijab, and there are women who do not want to wear the hijab. The question comes that what is the origination of the idea of hijab? कहाँ से आ रहा है ये हिजाब, ये घुमटा क्यों आ रहा है, क्यों था ये? Whether it is in when there are these texts, what is the origination of the idea or the need of wearing a hijab or a ghumta? So these questions are very pertinent, and even in the legal sector, at least in the Indian judiciary, marital rape hasn't been it is still legal in India. And even today, and it is not just about marital rape. Even when even when there is a survivor of rape, she has to she has to prove it in the court that she does not have a prolonged sexual history. Because if she has an existing sexual history, that will weaken her case. So aren't we upholding the concept of virginity of a woman? That if a woman had physical relationships before, that just weakens the case of getting justice for rape. So there are just different ways that these structures uphold the uphold the text. Like even in India, we have so many schools that separate uh, in a co-ed school. There are like boys sitting in one section and the girls sitting in the other section. What is this untouchability? What is this practice of weird untouchability? So these things just enhance the patriarchal mindset. Also, the rape culture. When women are, in a very simple sense, when women are asked to not wear this, to not wear that, even in educational institutions, because they're distracting boys, it just propagates the rape culture. So obviously these institutions, be it religion, be it the judiciary, be it the media, all these institutions propagate patriarchal mindsets and patriarchal teachings in certain ways. And the job of youngsters, the job of the younger generation, those who are watching, that their job is to question this. That why is this the way it is? Why do we have to listen, or why do I have to show this whatever you're telling me?
एग्जैक्टली देखिए मैं एक छोटा सा जो है टू बी ऑनेस्ट एक शेयर करूंगी आई एम अ टीचर और एक दफा ऐसा हुआ था कि देयर वाज अ गर्ल एंड शी जस्ट केम गर्ल स्टूडेंट एंड शी sat next to a boy and there was in front of her her brother was sitting and he promptly just said that and I will tell your father that you were sitting with the boy वो बेचारी बुलेट की तरह उठी है she just changed the scene and I was shocked but definitely I had no choice to do anything else इतना प्रेशर होता है आपके ऊपर सोसाइटी का और डेफिनेटली इट्स अ वेरी लॉन्ग वे टू फाइट फॉर दैट इसी से रिलेटेड मैरिटल स्टेटस से रिलेटेड फिर एक क्वेश्चन आ जाएगा इसमें कि आप जैसे वी नो दैट मैरी वॉलस्टोरकर said to be the first feminist in Italy, and she argues that it's the social class, and the private property that caused the gender discrimination, and women, as much as men, needed equal rights. And she wrote a vindication of the right of women in response to the great philosopher's Amir, in which he claims that in marriage women must have a lower and lesser disposition as compared to their husbands because they are sentimental and irrational. So you think such non-scientific attitude, misogynistic attitude, which he imbibed and unfortunately is still in practice here, how we can deal with this and how we can break the stereotypes, how we can even start this?
Well, I think as a woman, there are, of course, like you said about the stereotypes, the basic thing is to understand that when there is injustice in one place, there is injustice everywhere. Injustice happens everywhere. So, as a woman, I would suggest that women should support women first, because if something is happening, if I'm seeing that a woman is being unjustly treated in whatever situation, she's being unjustly treated, as a fellow woman, it is my duty to come forward to in support of them. Of course, as a human being, it is also my duty to support other people. But the political importance of that is that collectively, it is only collectively through activism, through awareness, that we can combat such patriarchal stereotypes. And to be very frank, men can't do that for us. We can't just expect men to, one day wake up and, just be equal and give us the equal rights. We have to snatch it. It's very
Have to
simple.
take our responsibility.
Yeah, like we don't have nowhere in history, be it LGBTQ rights, be it the voting rights, be it the scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, quota, reservation, nowhere in history human rights were not served in a platter. Human rights were never basic human rights. Feminist rights are essentially human rights. They were never served in a platter. So the only answer is to this is that to be self-aware, to make others aware, and at the same time to carry on political movements, politically driven activism for the greater cause. And like you said, that Rousseau mentioned that woman should be the second sex basically in his book in marriage especially. So again, that's just the subversion of identity that is there, right? That the and not only does it come along with that, there is physical isolation of women. There is also physical isolation of women. For example, that um, most women in rural India, they are not allowed to leave their houses. They are not allowed to leave their houses, which is a very contradiction because they are also expected to bring in water, to go to the well, to bring in the water. So there is a big contradiction there. At the same time, you'll have that women are also after a certain point at night or in the evening after 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. They are not, women are advised to not leave the house. So there is removal or erasure of women from public space. I know, I personally know a friend of mine who unfortunately had to discontinue her education simply because she was being stalked by a man when she would go to school. She was being stalked by a man, and she could not talk about it to her parents because if she did, then her parents would immediately tell her to not continue her education and immediately get her married off because there is always the threat of the spirit of being physically violated. That spirit always haunts us. So she had to discontinue her education. That is a removal of a woman not only from the education sector but also from the public space. Women are vanishing from the public space. So these are the stereotypes that, of course, we have to combat, but on a very personal level, we need to teach our friends or be more self-aware about such things, about such cultures. And I think that is the only way that we can break these stereotypes through education and knowledge.
Where we share the same situation, same plight here. It's quite common. इससे इनकार तो नहीं किया जा सकता है. So एक question मेरे जहन में आ रहा था कि in gender discrimination या in the plight of women, I can say that wages हमारा ज़्यादा मसला नहीं है, domestic violence बहुत ज़्यादा मसला है. When we go to the public, even just not for the working and we go for ours, just to run some errands, harassment कितना ज़्यादा जो है बड़ा परसेंटेज है जो हमें रोकता है अपने घर में रहने के
So, yeah, I mean, whether it is domestic violence, whether it is sexual harassment, whether it is stopping a woman from pursuing her education, or in a more collective sense, whether when you have such laws being passed, like I mentioned about the Karnataka, we also in India have this another law, which is which is the Citizenship Act, the NRC and CAA Act that was passed. So same policy differently affects different subsections of the society. So the citizenship, a little bit about the citizenship bill, which is that it adversely affects tribal women who cannot present uh, documentation because you know that India and Pakistan has a long pledged history, and even Bangladesh, we have a very dark and uh, dark history to say the least. So a lot of people came, a lot of migrants came, a lot of women came. Tribal women cannot present their documentation. And mostly what happens is in such cases is that it is the women who are being sidelined at the cost of men. Whether when there is even in Africa, this is not just an Indian case, even in Africa, when there is 14-year-old girls are being forcefully married off to uh, men at the exchange in form of dowry, at the exchange of cows. So, you can see that it's just prevalent everywhere. It's prevalent in patriarchal policies. We have patriarchal sets of stereotypes, patriarchal sets of um, patriarchal ideas that are prevalent in the collegium system, in the judges themselves. A few days back, the Gujarat High Court passed a judgment where the honorable judge, quoted that it was a 16 or a 17-year-old girl who was raped, and she's a minor according to the Indian Constitution, according to the IPC. The thing is that the judge said that women of your age used to get pregnant, and it is mentioned in Manusmriti. So how do you validate violence by quoting religious texts? So when you ask me about the religion, so all these things are so intertwined and they all upheld each other. The judiciary to some extent upheld, I mean, we have a secular judiciary, but when a judge is quoting stuff from Manusmriti, from religious texts, which have no constitutional basis, it raises the question that how to what extent are they even capable of being judges? To what extent is their awareness to pass judgments on justice or to be the vanguards of justice? So these issues are always there, and again, when whoever if you're studying law, if you're studying literature, journalism, whatever field that you're going to pursue, patriarchy will be all pervading. So we have to take conscious decisions, and we have to be consciously aware that okay, these are the things that we need to combat. When we reach the positions of power or whatever positions of power that we are all currently holding.
I can't agree more. There is an ism, होता है इसमें उसमें एक ism है अब हम लोग इसको commonly use करते हैं. It's liberal feminism. They just do not talk about only for the rights of women. They also women. They usually generally talk about the human liberty, and they argue that men's rights are also being exploited in many ways, like child custody, and we have some social class issues, as you already mentioned. Right? Apart from this, that they are voicing for both the genders neutrally and equally. In some conservative societies, in general, they are still being criticized brutally. So, how you think the liberation of women is associated with the liberation of men?
Like I mentioned before, that the liberation of when feminism talks about the liberation of all sexes from oppression, that by default the feminist philosophy accepts that men are also at the brunt of experiencing oppression. Like I said before, that in
Yes.
patriarchy it affects men and women and the LGBTQ community in different shades, but it oppresses all. It is not beneficial to anyone, frankly. From a very global political purview, if you have more women being in the, if you have more women who are also earning members, that just increases the GDP of the country or contributes to the gross domestic product. So it benefits all. It benefits the men. If you're against patriarchy, if you do not like the oppression of the woman, it just benefits all.
Yeah, it's true. The question in the series I'm having is that gender is social construction. We have a view of it. And we already know there's an immense of centuries hierarchy behind it since the agricultural revolution. So when we say that gender is socially constructed, are we falling into relativism? Are we just fighting for a genderless society?
Right. So, are we fighting for a genderless society? My opinion is that no, we are not. What we are trying to fight is that there is a stark difference between gender and sexuality, right? Gender is popularly considered as a social construct, while sexuality is considered as a biological construct. Yes, the gender identity of a person can evolve over time, like even Simone de Beauvoir mentioned in Second Sex, that one is not born as a woman, one becomes a woman over time. So whether the, if you have if you are sexually a male or a female, that is different. But what makes you a woman is when you simply identify as one. There are no restrictions on what makes a woman woman, because then we start questioning that what is a man? What makes a man a man? And if the answer is the XY chromosome, or for women it was the XX chromosome, then that is sexuality. That is different that we are talking about. When I'm saying that I identify as a bisexual woman, it means that my sexuality is bisexuality, but my gender identity is a woman. Now, over time, I might feel more comfortable in identifying as a man, and then I'll be identifying as one. It's simple. It's just like it's like wearing clothes. It's simple as that. There are people who are a gender, or they do not identify as any of the genders, and that's fine. It's like money. It's a social construct. We are taught to believe, or we are taught that we need it, but we really, it's a debatable thing. But it's at the end of the day, it's a social construct. There is no scientific evidence that a gender is a biological thing. That is sexuality.
Yes, it's quite right. Almost done, but having talked about all these things, you have already mentioned in all to the questions the plight of the women. Definitely, from our side, we know that. From your side, we know that. If you want to sum it up, what type of a very disastrous basic differences or discriminations on the basis of sex the women in India and your side are facing, and what type of a legal safeguards they have at least for themselves?
So, what is the socio-political judicial status of women in India it's a, the answer actually basically is a wide gambit because of the intersectional privileges and oppressions that work at the hand. Because if you're an upper class woman in India, you'll have more easier access to the judiciary than a woman from a village say. So in India, there is obviously like you have the Karnataka hijab issue that played. You have marital rape that is still legal in India. India recently also argued about the for the same-sex marriage, and the domain of it is not so that two girls or two boys can marry each other, but the domain of that is that the marriage in India judicially has a lot of benefits to it. The Inheritance Act, or you have sharing the same bank account and other privileges, the insurance policies, these are all curtailed towards a very the marital structure. These policies are curtailed towards the marital structure. Now, if LGBTQ people, which includes bisexual, lesbian, all these women, or and men, gay men, trans men, which includes all of these. So, so how do they get the access to these benefits of insurance policies? How do they get access to this if they're not allowed to marry? If the state doesn't recognize their marriage legally? So these issues are there. Obviously, religion has been playing a huge factor recently in India. So communal tensions has been increasing. So a couple of years back, there was this issue last year, I guess, of the Bully Bhai app, where Muslim women journalists were targeted specifically by the Hindu right wing, where their images were uploaded in this Bully Bhai app, and their pictures were auctioned. So again, you have the targeting of Muslim female journalists more than the targeting of Hindu female journalists. Female journalists are obviously targeted on a broader spectrum more than the male journalists, but you'll see that Muslim women journalists are being targeted far more than the Hindu female journalists. So there are all these intersections, and politics plays a very, very important role in in initiating those differences, because right now India is not only divided on the communal lines, India was always divided on the communal lines. Islamophobia was always there. Misogyny was always there. But now these issues are being propagated. We have ministers making homophobic remarks, misogynistic remarks, communal hate speeches left and right without any consequences. And that is initiating riots. That is initiating riots. That is dividing the country on a lot of fronts. So we have that is currently happening in India. And like I said, it can only be combated with education and knowledge and internalizing that knowledge. It's not just that I'm reading Simone de Beauvoir's Second Sex and ठीक है मैंने पढ़ा है ठीक है okay. No, it is about also incorporating that in your daily practice. I think that is very important because we have so many literate, educated people in this generation, in both the countries, and you'll still see them making weird remarks, making misogynistic remarks, and that is where education fails. My education should not be in just quoting feminists. It also needs to be incorporated in my actions, in my thoughts, and that can only happen when I actively challenge or retrospect and introspect at the same time. The change must start with me before I go on to the world and talk about the changes. So that is something that I think all of us, men, women, children, everyone should try to understand the it begins at home. If you sit and examine how your family works and how your idea as a woman, your idea of your family members and your brother's idea or your father's idea of the family is very different, is starkly very different. And that is when we start questioning. I think feminism begins in the house. When you start questioning your mother, you start questioning your father, that tell me, why are you doing this? Why are you expecting this, or why is it expected of you? It starts with there. And obviously it expands much beyond the family, but yeah, it starts with family.
Yeah, it's quite right. If we say that politics and religion, ये दो चीजें बहुत ज्यादा प्ले करी क्योंकि इनको मैनिपुलेट किया जाता है ज्यादा से ज्यादा यहाँ पे. सो इसमें हमारे पास जो एक बहुत खौफनाक टूल है जो यूज किया जा रहा है दैट इज प्रेजुडाइज. प्रेजुडाइज जो है वो इम्बाइब किया जा रहा है हमारी सोसाइटीज में और ये जो है बहुत ज्यादा प्ले करता है रोल मिसोजिनिस्टिक एटीट्यूड के अंदर. इस चीज को एडल्ट्स लेवल के ऊपर हम किस तरह से देख सकते हैं या कुछ ऐसा तरीका जिसे खत्म किया जा सकता है जहां बताया जा सके कि यू आर बीइंग मैनिपुलेटेड, यू आर बीइंग प्लेड बाय दीस फैक्टर्स.
Yeah, I think it comes that as human beings, since we have internalized a lot of concepts without even examining them, we make certain comments, we make certain decisions, any decision, any major life decisions, without introspecting in our own self bias that is working at the forefront. So a very simple example would be that how to combat these prejudices is only when you can stand up. And it's when you see in a very small micro scales, when you see your friends making homophobic remarks, when you see your uh, uh, elders making misogynistic remarks, that is the point when you ask them to explain. If someone is making a homophobic joke, instead of laughing at it, because laughing at it is complicity, and instead of laughing at it, what if you ask them to explain that, what you said, I really did not understand, can you please explain? And that is the moment the person will stop and start thinking that, okay, why did I find this funny? Why was it funny? Why is a rape joke or a homophobic joke, how is it funny? What makes it funny? And that is when it reflects upon the internal misogyny or homophobia that is at play. So, as adults or as young adults, that we can do is to curb these mentalities that is prevalent in our classrooms, in our playgrounds, in our family, everywhere.
Yeah, I really second your thought is quite Very well said. तारीफ में क्या ही है वैसे, but this is right the practical way. Time is really running out, and we all know that such topics are always unending unless we really get into some practical solutions. उसके लिए हर तरफ से हर फ्रंट पर जो है वो फाइट्स तो की जा रही है, उसको हम देख रहे हैं. और इसके लिए यही है कि we must learn to recognize what is gender bias, and we should start the equity from our homes and from our very families first. फिर ही हमारा कुछ जो है वो हो सकता है. So, in the last, मैं आपसे सिर्फ ये पूछूंगी कि the whole discussion, in few words, how you could sum up this discussion, why we were here, apart from कि हमने सब explain किया है, हमने सब देखा है gender discrimination के बारे में, but you could see the outcome of discussion. You just took pain to come here and we are talking here.
Sumaira, can you please repeat the last part? I think my network is a little wobbly.
I'm just saying, we've already discussed everything. We explained all the terms and all the factors, everything. This discussion we are just having here, as I said, you took pains and you just came here and we're discussing everything. How you could sum up this discussion in few words? You see what will be, what should be the outcome of this discussion, this sitting right now.
Summary of this discussion would be for everyone to encourage them, I would encourage them to think. I feel that as a student of philosophy, all great revolutions started with ideas, started with thoughts. So whether you support feminism, whether you don't support feminism, whether you agree with it, whether you disagree with it, regardless, if you look at the society, if you look at your family, let's not even talk about society. If you look at your family, there are things, there will be disparities that you might be observing. There might be disparities in your own idea of your own self. There might be disparities in how you view yourself as a man, as a woman, and all of these things. And I think that starts with just shutting off your phone or whatever that you're doing and to start sort of thinking that what makes you a woman, what is a woman, because there is no proper definition of a woman. What makes a man, and once you start going into that line, that alley of thoughts, then you discover a lot of harsh, dark realities, and that's where the self-awareness starts. That's where political, social, economic awareness starts. So even if you're not into reading, even if you're not into uh, going into these debates and this stuff, but since all the audiences who have joined, the suggestion would be to think, to start with thinking, to self-examining, and that is where every seed of revolution, feminism, everything starts from a thought. So that would be my advice.
Yeah. है तो ऐसे ही जी जी आप
थैंक
किससे
यू
बात कर रहे थे.
बहुत अच्छा लगा आपको इस टॉपिक के इस टॉपिक थे उसके वैसे क्वेश्चंस थे उसमें बहुत अच्छा किया और बहुत सीखने का बहुत सारी जो हमारे पास जीवन में कॉन्सेप्ट है मैं समझता हूँ कि वो बहुत सारे स्टूडेंट्स के होंगे थैंक यू आपका आपका मिलता है
Thank you so much, Altaf. Altaf, thank you so much, Sumaira, for inviting me and having these conversations. Because like I said, that a lot of people have this illusion that they know what feminism is. Uh, they feel that they know what it means. They feel that anything, and that is where they decide that without having any concrete knowledge of the foundations of feminism, they decide whether it is right, it is wrong. They have their own, they formulate their own biases against the concept of feminism without even understanding what it means, what it truly means, and also from a very philosophical point of view, feminism is divided in so many lines. You have Marxist feminism, anarcho-feminism, liberal feminism, eco-feminism, Maoist feminism. So no feminists agree. We have a set goal, that is to abolition of all oppression and equality of sexes. But the path to that is not a well agreed one by people even in the feminist circle. So just to understand that it's a political movement, it is also an intellectual endeavor, and it is not what we initially think from Instagram reels or Facebook. देखा किसी ने बोला कि अच्छा मैं feminist हूँ, ये feminism है, तो मैंने मान लिया कि ये feminism है. That is not what it means, and it is much more than that.